When I think about what stands out or what is award worthy, am I jealous of it? Do I wish I did it? Does it feel like it's stuck with me and I just can't, get it out of my brain? I keep thinking about it.
Hello and welcome. Thanks for listening into Good Practice,
where we talk about what makes good creative and good business.
From Stocksy, the artist-led visual media co-op serving the creative economy, I'm Trace Cohen, CEO.
And I'm Genevieve Ross, Creative Director, and we're your co-hosts. Season 1 of Good Practice focuses on conscious curation, the art and science of making strategic creative choices.
Curation is a practice at the heart of our day-to-day work with visual media at Stocksy. So we've invited friends and collaborators, creative professionals of various stripes, to join us in conversation.
Today's episode features Amy Carvajal, creative executive and founder of Amy & Co.
Wonderful to have Amy Carvajal with us today on the Good Practice podcast. Amy is a creative executive and advisor who has earned her stripes as one of the marketing and advertising industry greats in all seriousness. Amy has held various simulations of chief creative officer titles across agencies like Publicis, Wunderman, McCann, Ogilvy. She was Code Theory's inaugural CCO and led that global team to many awards and being listed as Ad Age's Business Transformation Agency of the Year. Her work has won an incredible 90 industry awards. And last year, 2024, Amy was named to Campaign's as one of Campaign's most inspiring women in 2024, which we agree. Amy, your recognition within the industry has led to your recurring presence as a juror and coach. I believe that's the Lears, Cannes, Effies, across the board. And weighing in on the best creative communications out there in any given year. And today you run Amy & Co., helping startups and companies of all sizes realize their potential to lead positive change. And you really mean that. Good values and good business go hand in hand for you, giving you the markings of the most excellent Good Practice podcast guest. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm not quite sure if I can live up to that description or if I do, but what a great intro. For moments, I've almost, who are we talking about?
Thank you so much, Amy, for joining us again. We spoke to you back in February for our webinar, The Curation Paradox. And as Tris mentioned, you've sat on juries like Leah, the Effies, the Webbies. So you're constantly seeing what rises to the top and why. So to kick things off, we'd love to explore this a bit more and know what kind of things have been grabbing your attention lately and what you're finding is standing out and what kind of conversations are happening behind the scenes.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking that question. It's really interesting. It's, there's so many different facets of answers to that. What's standing out versus also what stands out in, a jury room. When you're in person and or after judging and they get the jurors to come together and there's that discussion on certain pieces, I find, our criteria often, we're talking about the top of the top and what's award worthy, and what resonates with different jurors can be very different across the panel. The latest we've been kind of debating is the use of AI and technology. And the debate becomes, this was really stand out for the moment when it was done. This wasn't happening. And I find what they did really risky and gutsy and bold. But today, now in this moment when we're judging, it's no longer, and everyone's kind of doing it. And you kind of get into this moment of debating, are we awarding it for what it was then, or are we awarding it for what it is now? And my POV is that we should be awarding it for what it is now, because it should stand the test of time. So if you're the first, are we giving you a trophy for being the first, or are we giving you a trophy for being the best? And I always think it should be the best, and have a really innovative use of technology that sticks with you. So I always kind of ask myself, when I think about what stands out or what is award worthy, am I jealous of it? Do I wish I did it? Does it feel like it's stuck with me and I just can't, get it out of my brain? I keep thinking about it. Does it have legs where I want to see more? Feels like there's a part 2 to this campaign or other. So when I think about that, there's so many different uses, because sometimes what my perspective changes too over time. You see something come out for the first time using this technology, it feels really innovative, and then a few weeks later it's no longer, and you're kind of on to the next big thing. So it's really hard, I think, even now, because it's just the landscape is changing so much. So I find the best is the ability to stand out. Like, what work has the ability to stand out, and what is creative? It's really I think as creatives, it's the ability to see the world and things differently and use our tools in very different, unique ways. And you think of artists, even well-known fine arts, where, did they use the camera and the developing technology in a really unique way to get a certain photo to come alive in the development process? And maybe it's a unique process that nobody's ever, done or used before. Same thing with technology. And so I think there's a lot of things that, I look at in the art world or in the creative worlds, where I draw inspiration. And something that really stood out with me that I cannot forget is the Amy Sherald show at the Whitney. I don't know if fantastic, just fantastic on the way that she uses color. You really can't experience color in her, to see her art when it's reproductions, online or in magazines. You really have to see it in person. So that seeing it come alive in front of your face live at the Whitney was just, fantastic. I was not expecting. It's almost like this yellow is just such an interesting shade of yellow. You feel the fabric. It's not just a flat kind of vibrant yellow. It has this very tangible aspect to it. So something that I think you can really only experience, in person.
When you started talking about yellow, it reminded me, I'm reading a book at the moment, The Secret Lives of Color by Cassia St. Clair. I think I'm still on yellow. Like, I started on white and there's so many different whites and I'm still on yellow. And this is after I actually ended up getting the audiobook, because I was like, wow, I've got a lot to go through here. There's a lot of different value systems attached to yellow. Like, some people think it's like a throwaway color, but it's association with gold and certain types of dyes and saffron, and the use of it for imperial and religious uses in terms of materiality and painting has also made it a very interesting color in terms of its democratization as we developed technology to make colors without having those very rare base raw materials. That's yellow. So
I have a question for you, Amy. As you were talking about AI, something that really became this great kind of starting point for all of us at the last, when in the Curation Paradox webinar. And you spoke about AI in a very positive light for creators or in the creative domain, as really leveraging AI in many ways as kind of table stakes, that it's a great tool to almost be able to establish what is a good baseline and then create from that place.
Absolutely. A lot of people are talking about AI as, wow, this was really creative. This was really innovative and wildly creative. Because they did it so quickly. Look at what I did in this amount of short time. And a lot of the emphasis is on time. And I think that, it's not about look at what we did in so little time. It's like, look at what we did, or look at what we're able to do. If AI can unlock something that we weren't able to do before, in a way that is not just, of course it's efficient. Of course it's a time saver. Of course it's a dollar saver in a lot of ways. But is it unlocking something that we as humans couldn't do before? Then, it gets really interesting for me. And can it unlock, different ways of thinking? I think it's helped me kind of, sometimes I'm forming an idea and I'm like, what might this look like? And I'm drafting it in my head. And then I have to spend hours in, previously, either searching for that perfect image or photoshopping images together or doing a really amazing sketch to try and convey it, or with words convey it, and hopefully people imagine what I'm imagining, what's in my head. And the use of AI has given us the ability to get that out and on paper faster, or in a way that almost once you see that idea, sometimes you're like, oh yeah, no, that is not going to work. Almost as a filter for myself to also filter out, my own ideas. It can unlock things, but it also is used as a way for me to figure out the norm. If the first thing that it's spitting out typically it's something very common because it's pulling from what exists and what's known. It's not generating from something. It doesn't start from zero. It has a space of starting from, the library of wealth and information that we have out there. So I most often find that is the most common answer, and everyone else is getting that same answer. So how can I prompt it or use tools in a way that manipulates it in a very different way to unlock where I need to go, not unlock the final endpoint? I find most of the generative work is examples of use of technology in really innovative ways and wildly creative ways, but it always feels like it's missing a little bit something, especially right now. It's advancing so fast, but people that's missing that kind of human depth, or it's something that is able to tell us what the norm and the common is so that we know what to push beyond. And for me, that doesn't just save time in creating the idea, it helps me get to what is really differentiated faster, because I'm able, I don't need to have all these focus groups and kind of talk to a lot of people to say, oh, that's been done before. Even in my example earlier, on our juries, this is ripping off something that exists in another region. You just haven't seen it before. They might have seen that. It really is sort of the table stakes common norm from which to begin and then know where to evolve to. I think it's a tool in our toolbox, but not the final chapter, not the thing that says, this is the fin, this is the final kind of output.
Yeah, I am not sure where this quote comes from, but that the network dreams in averages. So when you're using a network,
love that.
Yeah, the large language models, that gives you a really good roadmap for how our brains work and how we all kind of come up with like the same solutions to questions and the unexpected leaps that you have to take for human creativity to really develop or push past the common destination we'd otherwise arrive at. And I'm wondering how that is kind of affecting the way in which we're looking at what does stand out with creativity. So much of what's winning big at awards tends to lean into like earned media, and it's really about the message, and it's about changing a conversation around something and big ideas built for cultural pickup, not just like talking about a product.
Yeah, I find craft is really, really hard to do and often doesn't get rewarded enough. A well-crafted creative piece can be really well designed to the point that you feel it, or, it kind of takes your breath away, but might be lacking because it was beautiful, but I don't know what it meant, or it moved me emotionally because I found it really different, but I don't yet have a tie, especially in marketing, to what am I supposed to now think? Maybe that's the point. Just get me to think differently or get me to see this brand differently. But often the most impactful work is when it's telling you something or getting you to think differently about something. So I think, craft is the hardest thing to do. And there's a reason why in the award shows, craft is extremely competitive and often, doesn't have as many submissions within those categories, because people know, you really have to be like the creme de la creme of a design to be entering, the design craft, for example, or film. Was the cinematography just that spectacular? Otherwise, it's never going to win in craft. So, and then I think that, craft, and then also holistically the message, there can be different buckets in the way that work can really stand out. But even in the example of, Amy Sherald and how she was using the use of color, she also, her purpose was really trying to rectify the exclusion of Black people connected to imagery that has helped build the American identity. So if you think of images like the Times Square sailor kiss, that's iconic, or the ironworkers having lunch on that steel beam.
Yeah.
It's really, she saw that growing up, she didn't see herself in a lot of the art. And it really resonated with her in those few moments that she might have, and she wanted to rectify that and make art that is inclusive. But she also didn't want the focus to be on the individual skin. She wanted people to see the narrative and the individual and the individuality that person has, and really tells you stories in a single portrait. There's so much backstory that you can read into it when you stand in front of one of these pieces and try to consume. And you see that, she uses objects in such a curated way. Like this rag doll tells this little backstory of this adult woman, or the way that they have their clothes, or the body language that she captures. So it's not, the craft is excellent, and her use of color is unbelievable. And then the message and what you take away and what she has as a mission is so impactful that, that whole package is spectacular. But then you look at something else. Like, I really love the, the Aer Lingus Irish exit campaign. It's so simple. It's just a series of billboards, really, primarily. I mean, more than that, but, the most impactful pieces is just a billboard. And it's sort of like the adult age of, the test of, does it pass the billboard test? Is it as simple as when you drive down the highway and you see this billboard, did it have an impact, and was it simple to understand? That's sort of like the ultimate simplicity test, is if that idea can be deduced down into a billboard. And I just love that campaign, and it's so brilliantly done to promote new routes to Dublin. And to have something as simple as, the Irish exit with an arrow pointing to the right to say that, your exit to go to Ireland, the exit is 6.9 miles to the right, I think they did, meaning the airport's this way. To exit this country and, where you are and get to Ireland is just, it's so simple yet so brilliant. So I feel it can be very complex and really deep and really long to craft, or something that simple, and they're equally really, really hard to do.
And the Irish exit being such an incredible kind of meme to honor, because it can so be celebrated as part of that culture, and something that I certainly aspire to. So I just love that. Talking about the Irish exit campaign and the specifics, going back to that creative brief, as you said, right? And coming back to the creative brief in general. You shared recently with me an example of a client brief that you ended up fundamentally reorienting, which is really gutsy, right? Which is that the brief was written in a certain way, but in order to get to the best creative expression, you actually worked with the client to reorient the brief itself.
Briefs can be, they really are the first key to unlock amazing creative solutions. So I don't know if I'd say it's gutsy. I think it's good clients know that it's worth it to have your starting point be really strong and align around an end goal. So that, that brief is really what you're going to hold up to say, does this do the job that we set out to do? But sometimes in that journey, you find actually there's a stronger brief in this, or there's a better way of saying it, or we had an end goal that we thought was, if on a scale of 1 to 10 is at the 10, but we actually just moved it out to 15. So instead of having a brief here, let's move it out further and, surpass ourselves and what we thought the goal might be. And, larger organizations have a very lengthy process to get brief approvals, but if what we're setting out to do, we found a better way to do it, well, why not? Why can't we, let's go, it's worth it to go back through the process to get the approvals, or to be nimble. I think that's why everyone's talking about agility and, nimbleness these days, is not to let these old kind of archaic processes get in the way. And I think just really strong clients see the potential that we have and are willing to adapt or course correct or redo. So it's always a great starting point, but that's just how I see briefs, as a starting point. And if we need to move that starting point a little bit further out to in the name of great work, let's do it, because it's going to be more impactful for all of us, ultimately the brand. So working with clients that are very accepting and embrace that process, because it can get, it's not linear, are maybe they're the gutsy ones. I don't know that I'd say I'm the gutsy one. They're the gutsy ones. And so I've been fortunate to work with some really great clients who know how to do marketing and are confident in their ways. And a few examples, was in my past, roles, working on an energy brand in New York City, and
That was the one that was really interesting.
having them realize that what their impact and what they're doing with our home being New York City, is also their home, and that we together are collectively trying to move the needle to make this home cleaner, more affordable, stable, so that we don't have to rely on outside energy resources to power this hub of the world. And so, you don't sit there and say, ooh, Con Edison is powering this meeting, quite literally. They're keeping the electricity on for all of us in New York. They get the energy through to us, and they're flipping the grid to be a clean energy by 2040. And no, you can't see it because it's invisible. The grid runs underneath all of us. So it's sort of an invisible endeavor that they're on, but it's so amazing. And when we started to read stories of, there's more bumblebees, there's bluer skies, the green trees and the greenery that we have is because we're shifting to, cleaner energy, but also that it gives us stability. So our bills won't fluctuate. Less power outages. So wonderful things that they're doing, that those were the stories that needed to be told to raise brand affinity, not necessarily an education on where is my money going. It's more your money's going to all of this to make it possible, but not just financially. They really they said something that I thought was really interesting, which is we don't actually want people to spend more every month. We want them to spend less. And in explaining that, they said, we want New Yorkers to consume less energy. That gets us to this goal faster. So the campaign was really around uniting and getting people part of the mission to consume less so we can get to this goal faster. And it's working. When New Yorkers see the mission that we're all part of and start to look at things differently. You look at your bill not as money going somewhere, but sort of a data set on your consumption. Your bill's not going to be that high if you consume less. So let's consume less and let's get there faster so we can, stabilize it. So that's the kind of stuff that gets me really excited. And I think that the power of the brief is the starting point. And when you really, for me to be on the journey of, where I am in my career right now, meaningful work and meaning making is what's really rewarding for me. So I think it's less of the gutsy and just more of the maybe selfish desire to want to just make meaningful work and make an impact that people feel and has a positive driver behind it.
When you're approaching these briefs, you're trying to tell a different story, that you're not competing with your competitors. You're competing with the stories that already exist within your industry, within the attitudes towards the product or the audience. And so I love also how that kind of ties back to Aer Lingus and just that cultural specificity. And, so an idea like that, you can imagine how many approvals that would have to get, where, do we have sensitivities around this or that, or how's it going to be perceived? But in the end, like the humor won out with that. It made me think of Nebraska. The Tourism Board of Nebraska had this advertisement, Nebraska, it's not for everyone, which I thought was fantastic because it's true. and also it's just a way of kind of generating a conversation around a place, and you're selling it through an approach to humor in a self-reflexive way.
Well, I think one of the groundbreaking pieces of work that I know you through, Amy, was the You Buy Kotex Break the Cycle campaign. And that was very much talk about meaningful work. You talk about turning a brief on its head, although I don't know what the brief there was, right? But was very much about taking old stories and old ways of seeing things and doing things. And the fact that, prior to that campaign, the notion of it was before all the, menstrual health and wellness had really become front and center. Now we talk about menopause and perimenopause like it's the prom, So it was a very different time, and the work that you were doing with that, You Buy Kotex campaign was normalizing the period, was normalizing the fact that we bleed every month, and kind of creating a whole new narrative for what women's health looked like. What actually was the brief initially for that campaign? Was that a similar case of turning the brief on its head?
That was interesting. They were a known brand, but slipping, and needed to, the Procter & Gamble was in the number one seat with Always and Tampax, and they just, a bold client saw that there was the potential to do something really game-changing and kind of swing for the fences, so to speak, because what do you have to lose? I think it's more risky when you're in the number one seat and you say, hey, let's do something totally different. Everyone kind of goes, well, wait, what we're doing works, why change it? And I think part of our role is we're constant. You never know what's coming next. You constantly need to be changing and reinventing. And I think that story is also really interesting because it's where did we draw our inspiration from to crack the code? And it came from the research. So, the brief was, we're unapologetically colorful and bold but just kind of give us something that stops the bleeding on our on our sales and change what we have. We have to do something drastic. And so that recognition that the client had was gutsy and, great marketing to start. But in our process of uncovering who do we need to talk to and what do we need to say, we realized that there's a couple of things that happened. We realized and learned this is the most loyal category. Women don't typically change and experiment with products when it comes to femme care. Often what you tried at the beginning is what you stick with for life. So it's the most loyal category that exists. And knowing that, how the heck are we going to get you to change to this product? We probably need to target those that are coming into this category at the beginning then. So, okay, how do we talk to, and now we're realizing in our research and studies that women are getting their periods earlier and earlier, as early as 9. Oh my gosh. Okay, we're talking to young females. What's causing all of this and how do we get them as early as 9? And then we're also probably talking to their mothers, or we need to get them to request it of their mothers because they're typically the ones purchasing. What are we going to do? So we realized we really needed to understand this audience and did a survey. And I remember we were sitting around a round table when the survey came back and we all read through the results with a highlighter in hand. I looked down the paper and I saw 97% of females answering this. It was 10,000 respondents. 97% of them said that they were ill prepared for their first period. And when we read all the other questions, we realized they didn't know what to do with the product. They didn't have the product on hand. They were ashamed, so they didn't want to ask any questions. There just was so much taboo and shame surrounding having a period, which happens to 50% of the population. Why is this happening? Yeah. So we realized that we had to do something to educate, to do something to break down those walls of taboo, to do something to take a stand against what was happening. And the brand was willing to take a stand against and say, listen, we were also part of the problem. That is why we're changing all of our marketing and our package, and relaunched the package not from white and medicinal, but to black and colorful with bold statements. And we did all of our messaging was around how we get them and how we're here to support them. And the website even had 1 question, 3 answers, because those young girls would trust their mother, but also didn't really want to ask their mother. They would often ask their peers, but their peers would misinform them. And when they saw their doctor, they didn't truly understand what the doctor was saying. It wasn't really in their voice. So we built a tool. There was a section of the site that was you ask 1 question and you get an answer from a peer, a doctor, and a mother. And they got the 3 perspectives on the 1 question. And that, especially at that time, was pretty game changing to be able to do that because there had tons of vetting on the back end and making sure that they're getting accurate information. So, there was a lot of things that we did all on the mission of breaking down the walls of taboo, making this normal, allowing us to talk about it, and to end the sleeving. Why do we feel like we have to put our products up our sleeve and hide it as we go to the bathroom? So I think today, seeing all those colors and the packaging and, the aisle has changed, and I think that generation now, we're talking about menopause, and we're not doing enough work there. I still think there's a ton of work to be done in this space, but proud of the fact that we started something that then a lot of people wanted to be part of. And today you see a lot of talk around this, but not enough. There's still a problem and, still a lot of jobs to be done. But I think that was an example of, through the process, uncovering information and insights and realizing where our markers are of where we needed to chase and answer, and what exactly we needed to do to really impact breaking down those walls. And so it was a lot of smart work with a lot of very talented people and a very bold, smart client that all collectively we got there as one. It rarely is this a single individual. It's an amazing team working together to uncover such great moments that we can, kind of work towards. So I think there was also a lot of risk in that we were nervous. We were making fun of an entire category.
Sure.
So we also had the risk of the competitors saying something, or the sarcasm not landing, but we believed in it and we went for it. And I think the more you do that and the more you grow in your career as a creative, I think you learn from those risks and those failures. That's what shapes and kind of gets you to be more gutsy, or, all of us have had amazing, successes and terrible failures. And you learn from it. So that one was one that worked, but there was a lot of risk taking in that, a lot of waking up in the middle of the night going, oh God, I hope this works.
Yeah.
And it really did. And I love how you talk about the end of sleeving. It literally takes me back to kind of high school days. I mean, we've called this podcast Good Practice because we're truly looking at what is good practice for creatives, and really this looking at the intersection of good business and good values. And I truly mean it when I say that you do epitomize both of those, because I know it's really critical to you that good work is meaningful and is impactful. Tell us a bit more about your practice as a creative. Like, how did you start out? I mean, was creativity inspired in your kind of upbringing? Did you start out on the copy side, on the design side? Tell us a bit more how you came to the field.
Honing your craft, drawing inspiration, honing, your own craft and developing it and strengthening it it's a hard thing to define, creativity, because it can be in varying degrees. It is in all of us. It's just some are able to unlock more of it and maybe end up being more in a creative role. But strategy plays a really important role, and art and design. And the way that I think of design is not just visual design. There's design of process. There's design of using technology. There's design of the experience and the way users flow it. There's design of how you tell the story. There's design of your own personality and tone. So I kind of think of design as in not just visual, but across your curating and designing, these messages, and craft goes into it. And I mean, I don't just mean craft of, specifically visual design, but craft or others, but craft and, crafting things, tangible, three-dimensional. A lot of what we do is flat 2D art or on a computer, which, yes, we can do 3D design, but it's all done on this, single interface, versus something that we're really doing with our hands and using textiles. And so I think that my process of intertwining all of those, because I'm just very passionate and curious and wanted to learn and develop all of these different tools, I guess maybe enough to be dangerous, meaning, sometimes when I would sit down with developers, they would tell me that an idea that I wanted to do was not possible. And I don't believe that impossibility exists. Anything is possible. It's just, what is our hurdle that we need to either bypass, overcome, or remove to get there?
Love it.
Is it speed? Is it money? What is it that's holding us back? So, but in not being a coder myself, how can I have this smart dialogue to help unlock this together and not just shut the conversation down? So then I had to teach myself code. And, back then it was also Flash, how to use Flash and how to animate, and enough not to say that I'm a coder or a developer, and that I speak that language, just enough to have a dialogue with who the experts are, to get to unlock the potential of the thinking to make what I think might be really interesting. And do they agree? And so kind of maybe that's why I've come at these things all, and I wanted to make a book. Well, sure, I was little and I was always into, just, I think it's innate in some of us. We're just sort of born with being really interested in art. And I think I was never without a crayon. There's all these pictures that my mother's a photographer, and tons of pictures. And I'm always with something, making something. And it was just what I loved to do. But I was wanted to make books for some reason. And you can write a book and you can illustrate a book, but especially being a child, I didn't think that you can't make a book without words and art going together, was, I guess, my way of thinking, or that maybe that was, the books that I was most interested in. So I would illustrate the books, write the story, and then the craft, meaning I learned how to bind them with a needle and thread and stitch together and made these books. And some of them I recently discovered in our sort of storage area. And, I even made not just a puppet, but a kit. So you could make a puppet and I would sell the kits.
Each one teach one and market it.
Yeah.
I love that.
I think it might be being able to step outside what's obvious and the norm, and being able to see things differently, or what I think what a great process is identifying the triggers that get you to think differently. For example, Genevieve, when you were using the color yellow as an example in your earlier story, I was inspired by the associations that you made and that you kind of took away, that it wasn't just a color, but it's influenced by food. And it was like, well, you don't just think of yellow as like a tool in design or painting or photography or other. It's like it helps you sense things, taste the food, smell the food. If there's a lot of yellow in it, I sense, maybe there's turmeric or saffron, and, you kind of draw other associations. So I think when it comes to creative, you want to think about something and have those triggers that unlocks different thinking. So you kind of come at it sideways, top, down, center, whatever, no right way. There's no process to sort of do it except to constantly think of how can I turn over a different rock, or how can I come at this and solve the problem different from how everyone else might be doing it. And it's really those drawing on those associations. And, does me seeing, the Amy's exhibit at the Whitney, is that going to help me in my work this week? I think it would, because I'm thinking of how I tell stories of individuals in a very different way. And, simple things as like a stance might influence what photography I might choose in that curated piece differently. So I think that my process is just one that gets me to think differently. And I think when I draw those different associations and unlock that, that's kind of when you get excited and you go, okay, I'm starting to craft something with my team, with people, with others. We're all starting to craft something that's different. And so I look for those triggers, and, it could just be walking a different path that I normally walk outside, going to a different type of exhibit, knitting, and, maybe I get a little nerdy sometimes. I love being nerdy and weird. So when people say, Amy, you're so weird, I go, thank you. I love kind of going the unexpected. So I love to needlepoint, but I don't love flowers, and kind of, my vibe and my design and my interior that I gravitate toward tends to be a little bit more masculine in labeling. I hate labels, but for shorthand. And so I don't want to needlepoint scenes or flowers, which you typically find, I associate needlepoint with grandmothers. I want edgy. So okay, well then why don't I paint my own pattern instead of buying a pattern? And, maybe it should be a little bit more like heavy metal in vibe, or rock and roll, or, and then all of a sudden you wouldn't expect a needlepoint to be that. And that becomes my interest, and people might find it weird, but I hope in a good way. And so I like those coming at it from different angles, I think is probably how I would sum up the best process.
Amazing. Well, I would love to see, firstly, I want to see the photo of little Amy Carvajal with the crayon, and I want to see the heavy metal needlepoint work. But mostly, I just want to thank you from us at Good Practice. You've really painted such a clear picture of how you truly stand out by stepping outside of normal processes, stepping outside of old stories, of legacy, of sort of typical briefs, and really look for new ways to be able to present and represent. And it's been refreshing, and it's just been wonderful to chat with you. So thank you so much for your time being with us.
Well, likewise. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We hope you'll follow along or subscribe to Good Practice. This episode concludes Season 1. Look out for more Good Practice later this year.
Good Practice is brought to you by Stocksy, the internet's first and only artist-owned cooperative stock media agency.